Welcome to Represents. Today I'm thrilled to have a very special guest joining me today. It's my dear friend, fellow Canadian, fellow Montreal native, Erykah St. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited
Thank
to
you.
be here.
Thank
Fellow Montrealais, I love it.
Montreal. Erykah holds an impressive position as digital director for the esteemed governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, who proudly stands as the state's first black governor. But that's not all. Erykah is also a host of her podcast, The M Word, where she talks about the challenges of modern motherhood, and you can catch her podcast on all platforms. So thanks for being here with me.
Nice. Thank you for having me. Thank you for
Well,
like making it happen. I love it.
I love it. So listen, can you tell me about your professional background? I'm sure people are wondering. It's like, wow, how does a Canadian wind up, working for Maryland's first black governor? How does that happen? Tell me your background a little bit.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit. So, I'm an artist. I'll say that like through and through.
Hmm.
So, my background is that, and like my background is really like the journey of an artist who, starts in one medium and starts in sort of one area and has journeyed through, other art forms. And I'm sort of an interdisciplinary artist. So I started as a graphic designer in Ottawa. So originally from Montreal, born and raised, and then after high school moved to Ottawa. That's where we met, and studied design there, graphic design. From there, I knew that I wanted to learn more about visual communication and just be like rooted in that. So from there, I went to York University in Toronto and I
Okay.
studied communications and international development. The international development piece came in because the comms program like was double major, so you had to pick another program, and I didn't know what to pick. It was like on the spot in the moment. And because I'm, first generation Canadian, my parents are Caribbean, Trini, my mom's from St. My dad's from Trinidad, my mom's from St. Vincent. So
Okay, I didn't know that.
yeah, I represent Trinidad really hard because that is like I grew up mostly with around my Trinidadian cousins
Okay.
and like just mostly in that culture. But like yeah, my mom spent a lot of her childhood in Trinidad, so that was like a lot of my childhood. But yeah, my mom's from St. Vincent and
Okay.
the Grenadines. So but yeah, like I grew up with this international like context, at the dinner table. I'm sure you can relate, to your Haitian background. So like I picked international development. And so when I was in this program at York, I was like, design became a side thing because I was very much like in deep in theory at York. There was no like creative nothing. It was just like comms theory and international development stuff. But I freelanced a lot. So I maintained my design like aspect of me, but then I like became this like I don't know intellectual, I guess. And so while I was going through the program at York, I was like, yo, how am I going to combine like design and like theory? And I was like, I don't know, but ADRA, I always knew about this organization, so I was like, that'd be a cool place to combine. I could like be a graphic designer for them. And so they do like relief work and development work, and that's where like that development stuff would come in. So that's honestly like where that idea for me came in. It was just like, how do I combine? I didn't want to deny the creative side of me. I didn't want to deny the art, but I also knew that I also saw, I guess, like the fate of artists, like the fate of designers. It's like if you just stay a designer, like you just stay making business cards, or you just stay making flyers, like they're always gonna ask you to be that person. They're never gonna see you as the person who could like be the thinker in the room, And I was just like, I want to be the designer who's the thinker in the room. So, anyways, um, I made it happen. Like long story short, I made it happen. Got a job at ADRA. Like it started with working at another Adventist organization at the church, and then made my way through ADRA. So like honestly, it was like straight up the will. Like how did I make it happen? I visualized it. I saw it. I desired it. I was like, these two things don't make sense, they don't add up, but I'm gonna find a way to make it add up. And that's would be my advice to people. It's like you might have this interest, or you might have this interest, or all these different things. You have this background that seems so unrelated to some other area where you want to go. But it's like if you just see it and you desire it, like that alone is the connection. And if you just believe that that's what is supposed to happen and unfold, the things will happen. So I, yeah, got an opportunity, worked at ADRA for many years, and
Mm-hmm.
literally doing design and development. But that happened in a time when print design was like, or I would say digital started happening, like social media started popping up. So like I would say 2012, 2011, 2013,
Mm-hmm.
like social media was a thing in our lives, and it started to become a thing that brands and organizations started to tap into. So ADRA, this organization, like was tapping into social media, didn't really have any strategy. I, as this creative thinker on the team, was like, we need to really be like da 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 into it more. So we went our marketing department basically went through a restructuring.
Mm-hmm.
I was just the graphic designer at that time,
Yeah.
but because I was very vocal about digital, honestly, and like where creative and digital kind of intersects and how the brand could be bigger online, if we just really tap into it more, a job was created for me. Basically, like, okay, you be the digital person. So I became the digital person for this organization. And so instantly had to combine my background in design, my background in comms, my background in that. And so I just kind of stayed in that realm. I just stayed in that zone, stayed in digital, developed myself in digital, like had fun personally online, with social media. So that's, how eventually over time my podcast started. But before that, just really posted a lot, dabbled in different things. And so that led me to eventually like here and now, how did I get this job is like ultimately doing a bunch of different digital jobs and being like connected digitally online. Yeah, that's really how it really kind of like works out. Where I'm at now, I will say, is like a return to creative, a return to like the raw arts. I will say the one thing with like digital and with social media, like there's so much creativity there, but there's also like lack of creativity there too.
Mm-hmm.
You're not as like touching the paper and touching the ink and like touching the threads as much. You're like manipulating shapes, digital shapes. So what I'm like sort of leaning into more these days is like returning back to like the raw art.
Okay. So how would you say, as your job as a digital director for the governor, how do you use technology to achieve the governor's political goals? How do you go about it?
Well, technology, I see it first and foremost as the microphone. The microphone, the office building, the ghost of a person. It's like the new, it's the new main mode of communication. And it's a big mode, because it's like there's social media. Like technology is social media, technology is websites, technology is apps, technology is texting, so I see it's starting really with like seeing technology as all these different like modes and mediums, but ultimately what is it? It's a way for us to share information, it's a way for us to learn, so I recognize that like I've always been passionate about communication, about speaking, about sharing. I'm starting to come into the awareness that like maybe it's connected to my Montreal heritage, being bilingual, all of that, language, having to negotiate language, so yeah, it starts with like seeing technology as all these different things. And then seeing it as, like I said, like really, this is the voice of not just Governor Moore, but really the voice of this time of this administration. It's the voice of the state right now in a lot of ways, and so I tap into my upbringing honestly from church, and like, when we have the microphone, we have to be responsible with that thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether you're a little kid, we learn that from a really young age. You're 5 years old, 2 years old. Okay, the mic is on you. Like, say what you're supposed to say. That's it. Let's go. Move on. So like, I see technology as that. Like, our microphone, our this thing that we could go in many directions. We could be totally reckless and irresponsible, or we could be totally mindful and responsible, aware that while I'm speaking, like they're listening, and they also have something to say too. It's not just about me in this moment on this mic, but like the other person as well. So that's first and foremost how I really approach like technology and the governor and like doing it.
That's amazing. Listen, so listen, in your position, obviously, you're passionate about technology, communications, and all that stuff. How do you, in your role, how do you see the importance of representation? I'm passionate about diversity, inclusion. You spoke about your background, being
Mm.
French, Caribbean, Anglophone. How
Right.
how important a diverse it's a diverse background. How important is diversity in the political field?
Ah, okay, it's major. I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you asked that. And I want to note, like, we laughed together at that moment when you said Anglophone because people don't know, like, that's a thing in our culture, in our Montreal culture, and our Quebec culture. Like, there's divisions of people, Francophones and Anglophones, and like, it's a whole thing there. So for me, diversity is major. Diversity is huge. I see diversity in almost like a kaleidoscope, like those
Hmm.
that toy that kids have, that kaleidoscope. It's like multi-layered. It's
Hmm.
like almost like stained glass. To me, that's diversity because it's like, okay, there's diversity of race, diversity of like cultural background. There's diversity of language, diversity of thought. There's diverse ways that people process information. So like as an artist, like I process so differently as a left-handed person. I process so differently, as a English person that speaks French, as an Anglophone. I like do French differently, and I'm aware of that. Like, my being from Montreal, like you're made aware. You're made aware of how different you are, and I think as a Montrealer, like you're taught to really like be clear about who you are, or else you're going to get trampled over. But also to be able to successfully, I think, exist in Montreal in a place that's very like tense, you kind of have to like recognize that there are people that are different than you. Even people who are French, there are different types of French people, so diversity is major for me in that way, and I bring it to my job. Like I super super bring that diverse perspective from Montreal to my job. I talk about it, even I talk about how being from Canada helps me to see the different diversity needs, the different diversity issues. We have diversity in preference for technology, for example.
Hmm.
Coming into my role, like we're introducing MacBooks, just very frankly. We're introducing MacBooks, we're introducing just the adoption of new technology, new tools. To me, that's also part of the diversity umbrella, being open to things. So it's really major. And I think that I'm really fortunate to be part of it, working part of an administration, a team that values that not just values it, but like literally lives it.
That's
Our whole administration lives it.
that's amazing, Erica. Can you share little anecdotes or inspiring stories? Working in with the governor. What's it like? What's the day to day like?
Okay, so the day to day is really fast paced. Honestly, the day to day is like, it feels like one day literally feels like a year. Like, no exaggeration. From the top of the day to the end of the day, it's just like really fast paced. And so, for people who are curious about him, like, you see, him online, you see him talk and stuff, and like, there's just all this energy. Like, he truly is like that behind the scenes. Like, it really is like that. Like, just fast all the time. So, it can be like, as a mom, it can be exhausting to be honest, because it's like, ooh, I gotta go home to deal with like, especially a mom of a boy, it's like all this energy. And not that girls cannot be, because I was the girl that actually was super energetic and tiresome. But like, I don't know, I have the boy that's like that. But anyways, like, yeah. So anecdotes, I would say something that happens every now and then that's really cool is like, in the state house, let's say, like there's students that come through often on tours and stuff.
Hmm.
And so sometimes in between, governors like meetings or, just in between a moment, like students are passing through and he's passing through and I happen to be passing through in that moment too, and just to see him pause and interact with the children and the children interact with him, it's like magic every single time, because it's like completely unplanned, completely spontaneous, and you get to see these kids like their dreams come true literally in a moment. And then you get to see him like be just like totally in his element of like loving children, loving humanity, like passing on the torch every time. Like he's always passing on the torch, always like, you can do this too. Like every time, waste no moment to tell the child in front of him, you can do this too. Exactly what I'm doing, you know, you can do that. So yeah, that's some of the stuff that like I see that's like really cool. Or like, you know, just people like being so excited about like pictures and like the handshake moments. Those are some things that I don't know, like I would say took for granted before. Like as an observer of politics before, you know, you see all these politicians taking pictures and you're like, oh my God, what is this? Like why? But when you're behind the scenes and you see what those pictures mean to people,
Mhm.
it humbles you every time. You can't scoff at it. You can't laugh. You pause and you're like, wow, like that made someone's heart bigger. That handshake, that photo, that selfie, it like lit that person's world up. Who knows what they're dealing with behind the scenes. So yeah, stuff like that like makes it really
Wow,
fun.
it's interesting that you say that. I spoke to a friend of mine, also from Ottawa, who happens to be a famous actor, Michael Mando. And when I saw him last summer,
Okay.
he was telling me that it's the same thing about handshakes, the importance of how he accepted. I don't know how he said it. I don't remember how he said it, but he's like he res- he respects, you know, the importance of, you know, when people come up to him to actually ask for
Mm.
their picture and autograph. You don't want to. You have to be on all the time, and you have to realize that,
Yes.
you know, that person is a fan of
Yes.
yours, basically,
Yes.
and you don't want to ruin their moment, right? So
It's
that's a big
true.
responsibility. I'm not sure everyone could take it on, but yeah.
No, it's huge. Honestly, it's huge. I could actually see it. You could actually see the responsibility, like, as from like a human perspective, you know, day to day. Because I'm not on the road all the time. There's times where I am on the road, but like there's times where I'm not. And when I am, it's like, wow, like what a thing to have to just every time, like in true sincerity, right? And like the people who do that really well are the ones who are just sincere each time. And I think it's some type of prayer or something that they say before they really like that keeps them in that state. Because it's like you had to stay in that state and like I don't know. To me, it's like a prayerful, meditative kind of state to stay there. And like you, like I don't know if I could be there all the time, you know?
No, no, no. No, it's interesting. So tell me about the transition when you moved from Canada to the States. You know, what was that like, the transition for you? You know, and what do you miss about home, if it's still home to you?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, yes, it's still super home. I think about Canada all the time, every day. Like I'm the Canadian that has become very patriotic, like living here, to be honest. Like I've become more Canadian here. But the transition was very smooth, I'll say, because it was very much I would say the first 7 years, it was still very much like an adventure. I was still very much curious about America. And I went to Canada a lot. I went home all the time. I went home at least three, four times, like every year. So I wouldn't like people didn't necessarily come to visit me a lot. It was more so me going
Mhm.
home just because I don't know. I just wanted to be home more, you know? But yeah, it was easy because it was like, oh, like home was right there, no big deal. I took for granted like just how different the countries are. I would say after year seven is when I started to feel like, whoa, this is a different place. Like I started to actually see the societal differences, just psychologically, you know, just how people approach, say, nature, for example. the way that Canadians, their posture towards nature versus Americans, or their posture towards food or health laws or just certain things in society. I would say it was around year 7 that I started to see those differences. But the first several years, it was like not hard because, like I said, I went home a lot and it was like I was on this adventure, you know. I was married at first, so I came out here. I was engaged, and I got married, and then I like quickly realized that was not the right course for me. So I got divorced honestly after a year. So it was like I was on this like really fast pace mode. I like went through life really fast. Got married again, second time, divorced again. It was really after my second divorce that I was like, whoa, I was like on a motorcycle going really fast and then got off. I think it's easy as a Canadian to do that when you come to the States because the life for the most part on the surface is very similar. A lot of stores are similar, shows are similar, a lot of things are similar, A lot of Canadians who especially live Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, Vancouver, you go to America a lot as a child, so it's not this grand transition. But I think after going through life like really hard and living really hard, that's when I realized like the Canadian hospitality, I miss that, So you asked like, what do I miss? I miss Canadian hospitality. I think there's a hospitality about Canada that does not exist in America. Multiculturalism like is something that in Canada sort of this war and we're sort of confused about it. As a Canadian living in the States, I'm like, can we just own it and love it and accept it? Because it's wonderful. It's been a blessing to me having this multicultural framework in the States. It's actually very protective. It allows me to be able to connect with other people, say when I don't feel that one group may accept me or not, that exists in the States. A lot of this kind of like pockets of people that accept you, don't accept you, whatever. In Canada, there's just a lot more warmth of people. And I mean, as evidenced by people wanting to move to Canada, especially in these hard times right now, like there's truly that difference. And I would say when I first moved, I didn't feel that. I think many Canadians don't appreciate. I think Canadians underappreciate Canada. I think many Canadians underappreciate being Canadian and the things about us that make us Canadian. So I miss the warmth. I miss the food. I miss the tap water. I think the tap water is like generally better.
Is that so? Okay.
Yeah, I do think so. Totally. I mean, like my family, they kind of get sick when they come, like straight up. Like I have to give them water bottles when they come, and I'm like,
Really?
wow, that's what we have to do when we go to the islands, drink water bottles. But you guys are doing that here in the States. It's strange. And then I'm starting to miss these days French. I'm missing French. I'm missing bilingualism. I never thought ever as an Anglophone that I would be like, I totally get je me souviens. I totally get it. I'm with it. Like, let me have a conversation with someone who's like, against Anglophones. We could reason. I understand you a little bit now. I understand the preservation of French. Because frankly, like me being here as a Montrealer, like I see the arguments of like, let's say separatists. They'll be like, your French is not even being preserved right now. You're not even passing it on to your kid. Your whole Montreal identity, where is it? And I would say they're right. They're actually accurate. And I understand why that's important, So, these are the things that I miss about Canada.
That's amazing, Erykah. That reminds me of a story my dad told me. Actually, my friend's dad told me. I visited Spain a while ago, and I remember he was telling me, oh my goodness, it's so good to see, Haitians, And the funny thing he told me is like when he goes back home to Haiti, he goes to the market and he just sits down just to listen to people talking to each other or just insulting each other. To him, it's just he gets a dose of home, right? I thought that was hilarious.
No,
It's a similar,
I get it.
it's similar to what you just told me,
Totally.
basically. Well,
Oh, yes.
like I told you, you can call me. We'll speak French, and I'll be honest.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely no, and I know you will, and like that's one thing I will say. Like I didn't understand that, and this I would have love to have another conversation about French, just French. I did not understand the militancy around French growing up as an Anglophone in
Hmm.
Montreal. Living in the United States has made me appreciate that, has made me understand that. And I remember, honestly, like as an Anglophone, I remember being annoyed with Haitians,
Hmm.
if I can just be honest. I remember being annoyed with Haitians and not so much like French Africans because I felt like they were still kind of figuring out Canada,
Hmm.
But like Haitians, I remember being irritated and like felt like a disloyalty
Hmm.
because I felt like they were more loyal to the whole French thing. And I didn't get it. You know what I mean? I just didn't get it, right? But now I get it. Like I just get it. It's like identity. It's like culture. It's like our story. It's if we don't keep it, like who will? You know?
It's interesting, huh?
So
How we
yeah.
can grow up in the same city but live completely different realities, right? You, the Anglophone side of Montreal, me, the Francophone side of Montreal. We meet in Ottawa, and you tell each other different stories. It's just, I find it fascinating personally, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what was your view a little bit of like Anglophones like
well,
in
for me, the
Montreal?
difference between you and I is that I left Montreal pretty early. I was
Okay.
12, so it's the early years, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to me, the reality was a little bit different because I wasn't exposed to Anglophones at all in my
At
short
all.
time in Montreal. So I, you know, the
No,
just
that
coming
makes
to
sense.
Ottawa, I discovered a lot of things during the
Yes.
move to Ottawa, the Black History Month and
Yeah.
all that stuff. I was
Yes.
oblivious. I was
About
young.
Montreal, right? Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Yeah. It's a reunion. I don't know. I feel maybe that's something that is happening. Like, so I do feel in general as Black people, we are in a renaissance. There's a global African Renaissance happening, and like this kind of reunion, these kinds of storytelling, sharing. Thank you for your podcast. I think these conversations is part of this, like opening up, sharing. Yeah, and we grew up as Anglophones having an attitude against, or yeah, against basically anybody French, but especially like Haitians. It was like, oh, like you guys are Caribbean, but you are aligning with like French, and it was just like this like war thing. But now, growing up, it's like now that I'm older, yeah, it's just I have more awareness of what all that means, and I see more unity. I see like where there's more possibility for like unity, and just how divisions created out of fear, like these divisions between even language. A lot of it's like I struggle with speaking the language, like, so I hate it. Like sometimes Anglophones, that's just what it is. It's like they're just having a hard time turning the tongue or whatever. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, listen, you spoke about the podcast. Tell me about your podcast, the M Word. You told me how it
Yeah,
started,
so
but
yeah.
tell me more about where you want to go with it, and what's your mission.
Yeah, so thank you for asking about my podcast, because my podcast is like under construction and rebirth right now. I would say it's going through a rebirth.
Hmm.
I think that's like part of the whole process of changing as a mom. So my podcast started as a place for me to share with myself and other women like this mystery of motherhood. I've always been curious about motherhood. I've always loved moms. I've always like just had this fascination with motherhood. And so when I became one, it was like, and then so I became one, podcasting as a medium, me as a person that explores new media. It was like, okay, cool. Let me explore this new space. I feel comfortable talking about what I'm going through as a new mom. I'm so excited about it. I finally felt like I could talk about the subject motherhood. So that's kind of why I started the podcast, right? But then over time, what happened? I got divorced. The pandemic happened. But really, like, as I was going through the divorce and before the divorce, it's like I have this show, I'm expressing this, I'm feeling this, but there's also this other stuff that I'm dealing with behind the scenes. And I'm a person that like wants to be authentic and like tell the truth. That's my thing. I just want to like tell the truth and like just be honest, and because I think that's helpful for people. It's helpful for me. So the podcast has been like, it's just a place to share stories, my story, and talk to other moms. The vision that I have, honestly, is like I want to travel the world collecting stories about motherhood. I want to talk about what moms are going through. I want to talk about their reality, share my reality. So the last sort of series of stories that I did was talking to moms about how they were faring through the pandemic, how they survived the pandemic. So the latest episodes that I have up are those. I have a few more episodes to release from that series of conversations. And then I'm just looking to really dive into where are we now? You know, how are moms feeling now? What's going on now? Moms are going through a rebirth. I know I'm going through a rebirth. And so I'm where I'm at now is just like, okay, how do I tell this story of like rebirth? And so thank you actually for having me on your show, because it's really helping me to like get back out into the world to speak and share.
That's what I love about this. Just there's so much to learn from everybody. Doing fantastic stuff. When you had the new job with the government, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Let's talk about it. you know,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
no, that's great. We're surrounded by greatness. And every chance I get, trying to chop it up, have a conversation, and see what we can learn from you. You know what I mean?
yeah. I think it's so important. I think that's how we grow. Like, um, I I miss how we got to know each other, which was in this like church small group setting. So I miss that world. I miss that. But I also see that this podcast world and these interviews and these conversations is like maybe the new space where we have these, bubbles where we learn from each other. I think we are mirrors to one another. We are teachers to each other. We're mentors to each other. And yeah, I certainly am definitely in a growth space. And I want people to see that, and I want people to like learn from that.
Beautiful, Erica. That's a great way to end it. I like to end my conversation by saying we learn today and we lead tomorrow. So I thank you for accepting to talk to me right now. I know how busy you are. Live from Memphis.
Live from
Live from
Memphis.
Memphis. Until tomorrow, right?
Until
All right.
tomorrow.
Safe travel, my friend.
So good. A
A
bientôt.
bientôt.